I want to welcome you to the World Summit for the Information Society and to this workshop on the digital transformation of learning, education, and training for the SDGs. My name is Reda Sadki. I lead the Geneva Learning Foundation. Our mission is really to foster learning innovation. And today I'm going to be making what I hope will be an exciting announcement, whether you are working in government, in academia, in the for-profit sector, or in the humanitarian development or global health areas. We have an exciting announcement today that could help you, we hope, uh, progress in your efforts towards improving learning, education, and training. This is 1993, and it is a newspaper newsroom. If we were to pull out 9 panelists, 9 specialists working in this environment, in this industry in 1993, and ask them about the digital transformation of their industry, I am not convinced that at the time, and this is with 2020 hindsight, that 9 panelists, however distinguished and forward-looking, would actually be able to correctly perceive and much less predict what was going to happen to their industry. Now, some of us might be waiting for the right app. Napster, of course, initiated this process of digital transformation for the music industry. But I think there's something fundamentally different and significant also about the nature of education as not just an industry, but a science uh, that positions educators uniquely to be actors in the digital transformation that is like a tidal wave rolling over all of us, all of our throughout our societies. But that educators might be the first ones to be able to harness and challenge and shape and reshape and reframe to improve the state of the world. Now, visions of the future of education are not new. This one is from the end of the 19th century. This, of course, is about information transmission. And one of the convictions we have at the Foundation is that we need a radical shift in the mindset with which we think about education from transmissive models to ones that fully recognize and acknowledge learners as not just recipients, for example, in local communities of global knowledge, but enabling every person, every community to contribute and to construct and co-construct this global knowledge. The challenges we have faced are not new either. Here are 6 of them. And I first want to lay them out, and then I'll explain how we at the Geneva Learning Foundation have found ways to challenge them and are developing new approaches, exploring new approaches to tackle them. First of all is digital dualism, and this is from Nathan Jurgensen, who's actually Snapchat's resident philosopher. He was one of the first to so clearly describe how the constant interpenetration of online and offline means that thinking in dualistic terms is no longer relevant or helpful. And that is true for education as well as for other areas. In 2017, we no longer need to say that we're talking about virtual or online education. There are various ways to learn. There are various media in which to learn. Online, face-to-face, complement, interpenetrate each other. Second is the dilemma of scale and access. How do we move from low volume, high cost face-to-face training to low cost, high volume approaches that do not sacrifice quality of the experience for the learners, much less impact outcomes or relevance? Third challenge is that of expertise. How do we recognize the value of expertise? How do we cull out the signal from the noise where everybody now can be an expert or at least can broadcast what they think they know? And how do we recognize the value of what actually matters, the people who actually do have the experience and the knowledge to significantly contribute around the thematic area? The next dilemma is applicability. So we know traditional conventional training suffers from a huge applicability problem with less than 10% of what people get from a training that they are then able to apply once they're back at work. So that's another challenge or dilemma that we need to work out of. Next is diversity, and diversity in a globalized world, hyper-connected world, we are going to be dealing with people different from ourselves. They will find us different from themselves. This is true with whether working in organizations internally or in networks or in the broader stakeholder sort of engagement community. So we need to find solutions to make diversity productive. Next is complexity. This is an aircraft carrier, and in 1988, it was published a study that demonstrated that an aircraft carrier is so complex that no one has the manual. No one knows how to operate an aircraft carrier. There's constant job rotation, and yet the aircraft carrier functions as a high performance, high reliability organization. How they achieve that is of interest to us and might contain some solutions as to how we tackle complexity in other areas of work. Now, a lot has changed that goes into that complexity, and some of the most significant changes are changes in the nature of knowledge itself. Thinking of knowledge as a reservoir, a course as a container for that knowledge, is flawed in today's world. It does not correspond to the learning needs that we have today. For knowledge workers in 1986, 75% of what they needed to know was right there stored in their brain. By 2006, that was down to 10%, which means that 90% of what you need to know is going to be dependent on how good you are at collaborating with others and how good you are with your digital skills to get the information you need from machines or networks of information. So we need a new vision for learning and assessment. And this is what we've laid out here, going back to 2013, a collaborative, flexible, motivating, participatory, supportive approach. And that's not just to have a nicer, kinder, gentler way to learn. It's because this idea that we work in collaboration communities, that we are constantly learning from each other, solving problems, using multiple media to communicate and to share, and constructing new knowledge because of the diminishing half-life of knowledge. That corresponds to what humanitarian workers, people working in global health and development as well, actually do in order to get their job done. And that is key to how we see new learning and assessment today. Learning that does not correspond to this, that relies on behaviorist methodologies such as gamification, that is not the kind of learning that is likely to help us solve our problems. Out of this a diagnosis of the context came the Digital Scholar Initiative. And the mission of the Digital Scholar Initiative from the Geneva Learning Foundation is to democratize education, not in the sense of just getting more people into massive open online courses, not in the sense of giving more people access to learning technologies, but in the sense of enabling people to become not just learners, but also teachers, to be able to construct their own knowledge through collaborative methodologies, through peer review, through dialogue and feedback that will support and enable every learner to become to be empowered to share what they know and to construct what they know, working with others to do it. So Digital Scholar is an education initiative to develop new skills and leadership for the digital transformation of learning, and today we are launching this initiative. More specifically, we're launching a call for proposals for expressions of interest to governments, government ministries, education institutions, training organizations, international organizations to partner with us to develop projects to tackle complex challenges for which learning is a significant component, but learning, strategy, execution, knowledge co-construction. We'll get into the details and the specifics later. So let me show you how we think around these 6 dilemmas that we can actually tackle them using this digital scholar approach. First example is that we have been working with the Norwegian Red Cross, the ICRC, and the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies since October 2016 to build a global community of action for ambulance and emergency pre-hospital care providers in the face of growing danger for healthcare workers and the people they provide assistance to. So within 4 weeks of the launch of this initiative, over 600 pre-hospital emergency workers from over 70 countries had joined and had produced over 70 case studies documenting their specific context and situations of violence and the strategies and practices that they used to prevent, mitigate, and improve their work in the face of that violence. This is the kind of thing we can do today, and this actually sort of brings to life all of the what might have seemed like lofty aspirational principles we can actually do in practice through an initiative like this, and we're building more initiatives like this as we go. So scale and access was the first dilemma, the first challenge. So in the digital scholar approach, there is no upper limit to the number of participants. We do formative assessment through peer review. And at the end of the day, people don't just get a badge or a certificate. They have something, a project that they have developed that reflects their indigenous knowledge of their context and how it's connected to global knowledge and practice. Another example comes from the World Health Organization, where we've developed an initiative around a guideline published by the immunization department. And this initiative engaged over 800 applicants from 70 countries. In 6 weeks, a first cohort produced 50 country-specific activity plans immediately applicable, remember the applicability dilemma or challenge, to their annual immunization planning. So again, very quickly, we're able to connect immunization workers from many different countries, from many different contexts, and have them develop work that was directly relevant to them, learning in the process, and peer reviewing each other's work to improve the quality using an expert designed rubric. The dilemma of expertise. The digital scholar approach minimizes the demand on the time of subject matter experts. Expert time is precious and costly, but in an approach which recognizes that every participant has something to develop, to contribute based on their own experience and expertise, we minimize the requirement for expert time for the more tedious tasks. And instead, we use what we call a rubric to enforce the standards of expertise. So we're not talking about letting people loose and doing whatever they want or whatever they think is right, but we're talking about driving their knowledge development through a scaffolding that will support them every step of the way. This process of peer review goes through very simple and specific steps. First, people write and develop a project. And that project is linked to what the problem that they're trying to solve. So it is project and problem-based learning. Second, they go through peer review, where having just done the work themselves, they then go look at how other people have approached the problem or the project and give them feedback. Meanwhile, their colleagues are doing the same in this knowledge community, in which there is also public space for dialogue and exchange of ideas and sharing of experiences. Once people have finished giving each other feedback, they're not done yet. This is not about a grade or some kind of summative assessment. This is about constant formative assessment. So people then have to process the feedback, interpret it, make sense of everything that they've exchanged and shared, and apply it to revise, improve their own project. So that is what we call the scholar process and the basis for our proprietary methodology, which is particularly suitable for complex contexts of work. This methodology supports metacognition, so learners every step of the way are thinking about what they are doing and having to make conscious decisions and reflect on their decisions in order to progress. Regardless of their starting point, they will be working and improving from where they, so from where they start. So whether they are experts or seasoned, so seasoned and experienced, or whether they are completely new to the field, they get the benefit of the collaborative intelligence, and that models what we know about what works in order to tackle complexity. In terms of outcomes, what do we get then? What is the impact? To go back to the ambulance course, here's testimony from a learner that was one of the indicators that we're now researching of how, through such an experience, we were able to observe a change in risk awareness, in mindfulness, where this ambulance worker now thinks about the possible risks and best practices in each situation before going out for a call. And that was not the case before engaging in this kind of global, networked, peer-reviewed project and problem-based methodology. Last is diversity, and we have run now cohorts with hundreds of participants from many different countries. You can imagine the tremendous diversity there. And diversity has its challenges, but having this sort of structured system and this way in which people can be sharing and peer reviewing and giving and receiving feedback has turned out to be tremendously productive each time, and productive in ways that we did not expect. Imagine Jean-Marie, whose ambulance is a Cessna 206 plane. He's a bush doctor in Burundi, engaged in dialogue and peer review with Romeo, who is a Filipino nurse expatriated in Baghdad. His ambulance is a medevac helicopter, talking to a Philippines Red Cross ambulance volunteer getting ready for a tropical storm, talking to Shane in Toronto, who's preparing his organization for a mass casualty incident. That diversity turned out to be tremendously productive. In the ambulance initiative, to exemplify that, here is where people came from, and here are the people who worked together in the system for several weeks. So how we resolve the applicability dilemma I've already mentioned, but basically in a digital scholar system, participants are producing knowledge that they can use through the use of problem and project-based learning. So for example, here is the mind map of the project that ambulance participants got to work on and develop. First, they told us about who they are. Second, they described an incident of violence or the threat of violence. And then third, they analyzed the incident. So they had to think every step of the way about what would be relevant to their colleagues, how they would help their colleagues make sense of it, knowing that those colleagues would then peer review their work. So this is how we came to develop the Scholar Partnership, which is the conjunction of the University of Illinois, Learning Strategies International, and the Geneva Learning Foundation. This partnership brings together the different puzzle pieces that are needed to do research and development in new forms of learning that are actually adapted to the learning needs of organizations and networks as well as individuals today. So the question is, does your organization face a complex challenge around capacity building? For example, one of the most obvious ones is you've issued a guideline but struggle with getting people to on the ground to actually implement it, adapt it, and localize it. You have a global strategy, but you're in a siloed organization and struggle with how to get different parts of the organization or how to get different partners to actually take that strategy and translate it into action. Second, do you have an interest in a scalable approach that can empower local communities? Not everyone does, but our approach is particularly well suited to do that, to connecting people working on the front lines in local communities to global networks in a two-way bilateral relationship as opposed to a one-way transmission of information from the center to the periphery. And third, there needs to be the realization that conventional approaches have not succeeded so far, and therefore that the organization, or at least some individuals within it, are open to trying something new, a new approach to do something new to make a difference and help achieve impact. So these are some of the use cases where we think we can be helpful, whether it's leadership, strategy, learning, education and training, capacity building, rapidly producing a large number of high quality peer reviewed case studies, guidelines, implementation, action planning, fostering collaboration across silos. This is a very versatile approach, and I don't want you to think that the examples I've given, that's the extent of the use cases that are possible. So here is the scholar approach. It's a proprietary methodology that can help organizations and networks rapidly develop self-sustaining, open, and scalable systems for learning, strategy, execution, so everything that involves a learning process. And it's really a very simple three-step process to get started. First, figure out, clearly define the problem statement. Second, determine if the scholar approach actually fits the problem statement. And then third, describe what success looks like. So we're opening today the call for expressions of interest, but there is no submission deadline. We will maintain open submissions and commit to reviewing submissions within a month. to determine if there is a potential for collaboration. And we are also commit, at least from our side, to implementation, to actually launching an initiative on the basis of the submission within 3 months of having received the submission. So the address for the expression of interest, if you are interested, point your browser to learning.foundation/EOI, and you will find additional information in a very simple form to fill out. Again, thank you for listening. I hope that this presentation has challenged your thinking and grabbed your attention, and hopefully that you've been able to connect some dots between what's been exposed here and the challenges and dilemmas that you've been wrestling with in your capacity building, learning, strategy, execution, and other change and transformation efforts in your organization and networks. Thank you for listening. And again, we look forward to receiving your expression of interest and to engaging with you as soon as you have.